Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CoLab SpacetoCo's free monthly webinar series designed to assist those working in community venues to learn, upskill, and be inspired to do their work more effectively and efficiently. We hope you find these sessions useful for the important work you do in our local communities. For those of you who are watching this recording after this live event, hello, and we hope you get valuable knowledge from this session. My name is Carmela, and I am the marketing manager at SpacetoCo, and I'm excited to be hosting today's collab session. So, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have a large number of people joining us. Some of you have attended collabs before. Some of you are our SpacetoCo customers, and some of you may have never heard of SpacetoCo or collabs before. So, for those of you who are new to this, I would like to point out a few housekeeping items to help you get the most out of this session. So, first of all, you can be rest assured that this session is being recorded. My colleagues are working hard behind the scenes and will ensure the recording is sent to you via email. It will also be available to watch on demand in our website shortly. We will also share a copy of our speakers' contact details and their slides and resources mentioned after the session. So, the topic for today's session is how to manage a venue with a small team and a shoestring budget. Today's session is for smaller venue teams ready to streamline their operations, maximize their resources, and build sustainable strategy for success. We'll dive into the Kete Aronui story to explore how venue teams can confidently navigate financial constraints and time pressures while still delivering high-impact community spaces. I'm really excited for our speaker today, which is Connie Boston, who is the administrator for the He Waka Ekenoa Charitable Trust. She joined in 2021 to support operations for Kete Aronui and the Ugly Shakespeare Company. She has since been a key driver of the logistics and operations for the Trust's performance space. The Factory Theater, a passionate arts supporter, Connie thrives in the dynamic nature of her role and loves seeing the positive impact the Trust makes across Tamakitakoto or Auckland arts community. So the cool thing is Kete Aronui is actually one of SpacetoCo's longtime hosts. So I've known Connie for a long time, so I'm finally stoked to actually get her to be a speaker at the collab to share her knowledge and experience in this particular area. So we want to welcome Connie to the collab.
Oh, hi.
I'll just pop your PowerPoint onto the screen. There we go. I'm gonna pop out, but you can print.
Alrighty, thanks guys. Kia ora koutou. My name is Connie and my official job title is Administrator for He Waka Ekenoa Charitable Trust, who facilitate Kete Aronui and Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, as Carm's just said. You will soon come to realize that my job title is in no way an accurate reflection of my everyday role, which no doubt is a sentiment which will be familiar with many of you here today. And apologies in advance if you have no frame of reference for ice hockey. I will do my best to make it user-friendly. I was super flattered to have been invited to speak to you today and also a little bit nervous. So just a brief bit about me. I'm in no way a cool professional speaker or corporate person. I have zero actual training in venue management aside from the on-the-job learning I've been doing for the past 5 years. My background is primarily in film production, which is mostly logistics-based. That's me there. So there's been some great overlaps from my past roles to my work at Kete Aronui. I spent 7 years working in film in Canada, during which time I firmly cemented my undying love of ice hockey. I love a good metaphor, so I'm going to be popping in some ice hockey references throughout this today just to jazz it up a little bit. And to answer the most important questions right out the gate, my NHL team is the Vancouver Canucks and my NZIHL team is the Botany Swarm. The topic of our session today is how to manage a venue with a small team and a shoestring budget, which I am lovingly calling the Kete Aronui story. I just want to acknowledge that not all of this information will be relevant to all of you here today, which will depend on your own venue's needs and operations, but hopefully you will learn something new, either about venue management or ice hockey, have a question answered, or just make a connection with somebody else in the chat today. We're going to cover some of what I consider are our most important venue management areas, including budgeting, where I'll be touching on some tips for those of you who might be interested in funding, and also strategic planning and talking about some of the ways you can maximize working with a small team. So I just want to start by giving a little bit of background on Kete Aronui and how we operate, just so that you can help contextualize some of the topics today. So Kete Aronui opened its doors in 2019 and is facilitated by He Waka Eke Noa Charitable Trust, which means a canoe upon which anyone can embark. Our trust was originally established in 2002 to run a touring theatre company called the Ugly Shakespeare Company, which we still run to this day. We found that there were no affordable rehearsal venues in our neighbourhood, so after securing some seed funding, we took over the commercial lease on the facility where we still are today. That means we are not a council venue or a council-controlled organisation. We are fully independent. Kete Aronui is a 5-room rehearsal space. It's accessible by our users 24/7. And in order for us to fulfill our charitable purpose, our users need to be doing something arts-based or tangentially arts-based. We've got a Tai Chi group that's been using the space since we opened, but it's martial arts, so it totally counts. And that photo at the bottom left is actually from a recent hirer who staged 2 nights of a dance and poetry showcase in the studios, which is super cool. It's the first time we've had an actual production in the studio in the 7 years since it's been open, so it really highlights the expansion of what our users are looking for in a space. Our trust still runs the theatre company, where each year we present a nationwide theatre in schools program. And in addition to Kete Aronui, we operate a 120-seat theatre in this same building. We also run mentorship programs, contract for arts events, facilitate community meetings, and lots of other things, all with only 2 full-time staff members. We do have a part-timer who helps with our Kete Aronui bookings on the weekends, and she works about 5 hours a week. We've also got a roster of casual staff, including venue technicians and duty managers, of which I am one, who work in the theatre when we've got events and productions on. Myself and our other full-timer, our executive director, Lara, have become very well-versed in the art of wearing many hats, which, as people who work in venues, community hubs, and council facilities, this is a concept which will be very familiar to you. I also just wanted to show some of the growth which Kete Aronui has seen. So you'll see on the slideshow there the figures from each May that we've been running Kete Aronui through SpacetoCo. I just picked a random month, honestly. There's a pretty big dip for us in 2023, which was when we had to close for a few months due to cyclone damage. However, the numbers have remained relatively consistent for the past few years. And that big jump that we had in 2025 was due to a few of the internal programs that we elected to run, so it doesn't reflect just external bookings. So just a few high-level things for you to keep in mind as we work through the presentation today. We're a charitable trust. We pay a commercial lease, and we operate with 2.05 FTE staff members. Understandably, most of you won't fit into that same sort of operational structure, but I do think there's a lot of knowledge to be gained when we have an understanding of how a venue runs behind the scenes. I'm a super big fan of sharing knowledge because I personally think we're only going to be stronger when we work together rather than trying to shut out anyone. And yes, a shutout is an ice hockey term. I never think of people who are doing the same thing to us, even if they're just operating a street over, as being our competition. They are our colleagues. And for reference, there is another theatre within walking distance of ours. Hello to the Dolphin Theatre. We're all working towards a common goal, right? Providing spaces for our communities, for our networks, and supporting a huge variety of projects, clubs, schools, and people to achieve their goals. Having multiple spaces where people can come and spend precious recreation time, participate in activities and classes, conduct meetups, this is always going to be a good thing. And what works for me and my venue might not be what works for you. You might have tried some of the things that we do at Kete Aronui before with no success, but equally you might have initiatives in your venue which have been a game changer for you. So if you have any questions about how we run Kete Aronui, which I don't cover today, please feel free to ask in the chat. And if any of you are in Auckland or you travel to Auckland and you want to pop in for a cup of tea and a look around, please come through. I am always happy to host. And just for interest, here's the comparison of monthly bookings between when we first opened and where our numbers are sitting today. This is just to give a bit more of an overview of our natural growth patterns and also shows what our high usage months are. All right, let's get to some of the nitty gritty. This is gritty and he haunts my dreams. And yes, I use the phrase nitty gritty just so I can make this joke. Managing a venue on a shoestring budget. And I really do mean the stringiest of shoestrings. Annually, over 50% of our trust income comes from funding streams, and last year that hit almost 65%. Granted, a lot of our funding is for non-Kete Aronui purposes, but we do continually seek funding for operational expenses, specifically our commercial lease costs and our salaries. So for us, funding planning and really careful budgeting is super important. Realistically speaking, only for the past 2 years has the income from Kete Aronui paid for its own lease costs, and that excludes lots of the other peripheral costs associated with its upkeep, like wages, cleaning costs, any maintenance that's our responsibility as tenants. Because the nature of the funding landscape is constantly changing, this is where budgeting comes into play for us. We cannot rely on any one funding stream as being a confirmed source of income until the approval letter comes through. So we have to be very conservative with our estimates from funders. We prepare a budget annually. So in Q3, we will take a week as a team of 2 and sit down and go through our yearly budget compared to the actuals and estimate based off of that. There is software that can help with this. Things like LivePlan, where you can pop all of your actuals in across the year to create a projection, or if you have accounting software like Xero, you can also use the actuals from that to build your base budget. Each of these plans will cost you something. We used to have a subscription to both LivePlan and Xero. However, 2026 is a super tight budget year for us, and we just couldn't justify the expense of keeping LivePlan, which for us was around $250 a year on top of our Xero costs, which we pay roughly $95 a month for. We'll make tweaks like that throughout the year because most contract rollovers won't line up nicely with your financial year end. Things like insurance costs, any software you pay for, any venue-specific plans that you pay for. These are all things that you can take a hard look at when it comes time to forecast for the next year and decide whether they are crucial or just nice-to-haves. That's not to say that you can't have nice-to-have items in your budget, but it is good to know what you have to play with if something needs to get the chop first. When I've got a quieter week in the theatre, I'll do some shopping around for pricing. Anything that we're paying for, which we have an option to choose from, we'll do some benchmarking to see where our current costs are. In the last 12 months, we have changed our phone, our internet, our point of sale providers. We've benchmarked our security and our cleaning costs. So it's really good to know whether what you're paying for is actually good value. Things like your insurance might come with a long-time customer discount, so it might not necessarily make sense to swap providers. But if you're like me and have to report to a board, preparing a paper on the going rates of cleaners in your area is such a tedious task. But it's a really good way to get some feedback about how you're doing cost-wise in a certain area. And it can be extremely helpful to tackle this throughout the year in small pieces rather than having to do all of your benchmarking at one time. If you're paying more for a service, but it's a high quality service, or if you have a really great relationship with a particular vendor, that can offset the price difference. And this is the first of many times where I will use the word priorities. It is super important for you to recognize the priorities of your venue, your users, and your operations. So in this case, a more expensive cleaner who does an exceptional job can justify a higher expense if having a clean venue is one of your priorities. As a rookie budget maker myself, some of the key things that I have to remind myself every year about factoring in things like preventative maintenance, any wage increases, including any changes to wage contributions that the government mandates, and just general operating cost increases. We've all seen recently how global events can have a massive and surprising impact on the way that we operate. So having a contingency or some wiggle room within your budget is something that I think is really essential. It also looks really great at the end of the year if you can come in under budget to your board or your key stakeholders or whoever you report to if you don't actually use the contingency. I'd be really surprised if anybody was operating with a budget like an NHL team, but it's important to remember that the basics of budgeting are the same if you have $75 million to spend or $75,000. Be realistic, have clear goals in mind, and be prepared to be flexible throughout the year. All right, back to my favorite word, priorities. Every year, or twice a year, or once every 2 years, however frequent you think is suitable for your spaces, it's good to sit down and figure out what your priorities are. I'm going to break this down into 3 categories: priorities for your users, priorities for your venue, and priorities for your organization. There will absolutely be an overlap between these 3 things, and where they do overlap is going to be an excellent way for you to see what are going to be the most impactful things that you can deliver on. This is going to look different for every venue, and can sometimes be really hard to pinpoint by yourself. So something that I find enormously helpful and often underutilized is asking your users what they want. This can be harder than it sounds for an organization like us, where our users essentially come and go as they please. Because we do have such a small team and we are not here 24/7 ourselves, we're often not in the venue at the same times as our high usage periods, which can make collecting that information really difficult because we don't have a check-in desk or a key exchange or even require any sort of face-to-face with our users. We've found that using the SpacetoCo messaging system is a great way to ask for feedback, but we also tend to get organic feedback from space reviews, social media, and post-booking texts or calls from users. Neither of our full-time staff have ever used Kete Aronui independently, so it is really difficult for us to know what the average user experience is like. This is why feedback is so important. And if you can find ways to gather that feedback so that you can be proactive rather than just responding when things go wrong, it will set you up in the long run. Obviously, some of the things people want will be totally random and not at all practical in the real world, because I once got asked if we could have a fish tank installed in the rehearsal studios. But there can be some really valuable information in there. We keep a running list of things that people ask us for: sound systems in the studios, better lighting outside, more bathrooms. And from that list, we can figure out which of the user priorities are cross-referenced between our venue and organization priorities in order to figure out what will be the most benefit for us in the long run, which will keep people happy, ensure repeat customers, and keep our facility running. The priorities for Kete Aronui haven't really changed in the last few years. 24/7 accessibility, flexible spaces, and fees as low as possible are our big three as a venue, and that is reflected by what the priorities are for our users. What that translates to for us as an organization is ensuring that we have the infrastructure to enable 24/7 access, making strategic upgrades to our spaces that still allow for full flexibility, and focusing our funding efforts on lease costs in order to keep our prices low. It's also important for you to be able to draw the line between the priorities that are helpful and those that aren't. If you're working in an environment where you've got loads of input from too many sources, so not just your users, but your direct report, their boss, your colleagues down the hall, random strangers, you need to be able to find a way to pan for the gold within all of that noise. That's not to say that one person's opinion is more important than another person's opinion, but you've got to be able to weigh the most useful impacts that prioritizing certain things will have on your venue and your overall operations. That is the number one reason that Kete Aronui hasn't been turned into an ice rink yet, because my personal feelings about the lack of rinks in our area are in no way as important as what our users actually need from us, which in turn helps us to reach our goals. Your priorities should be reciprocal. What is best for your users and your venue will help strengthen your organization overall. So how does this relate to your budget? I cannot hear you asking. Well, in a couple of ways. First of all, there's the financial outlay you're undertaking with any new initiative. New lights for our car park will be much cheaper for us to achieve than an overhaul to our bathrooms. So we can do some smaller things in our tight budget years and put the longer term, more expensive things on the list for years when we generate great revenue or for a funding application. Secondly, your priorities will impact your revenue stream. If you have lots of plans for better spaces and you're increasing the value of those spaces, that may mean that it's time to reflect on your space pricing. In the last 5 years I've been with the company, we have raised the prices twice. Our smallest rehearsal studio has gone from $7 an hour to $10 an hour. So it's not a huge increase, but that does translate to more income each month. Part of that is in response to continued rising across the board, increased internal costs that come with having more people in the building because we started going through toilet paper and paper towels at an absolutely alarming rate. And it's also a reflection in the reduction of some of our funding sources. So here's a big question. When was the last time that you did a pricing evaluation? A few years ago, we were lucky enough for SpacetoCo to help us with an evaluation on the pricing that we offered here at Kete Aronui. It was a really helpful way for us to be able to measure not only where we should be sitting in terms of our hourly rate, but also helped illustrate what was important to us, being financially accessible to communities and unfunded practitioners, while being realistic about what we have to offer. I will absolutely be the first person to say that Kete Aronui is by no means top of the line. We are like a well-loved 90s Corolla. We are functional, probably not your first choice, in no way fancy, but we definitely get the job done. A lot of that has to do with the physical limitations of our space. We have smaller rooms than lots of council venues and other community spaces, so we have smaller capacities, but we make up for that by having 5 rooms available. There is absolutely a world in which we could knock out some walls to make our 5 rooms into 3 with bigger capacities, but that would mean that we would A, not be able to support as many people, and B, we would have to raise our prices over and above what many people in our community can actually afford. Being realistic when it comes to things like setting rates, setting a budget for the year, or strategic planning is very important. Our pricing evaluation gave us a really great understanding of where our current pricing was sitting, what sorts of needs we were meeting for our users, the kinds of practitioners we could be targeting, and also a general idea of the pricing we could realistically be charging. We still often get comments from first-time users about how affordable it is, but I know that for lots of our core demographic, a $20 room hire fee is still a luxury. And so if we raise our prices much higher than what they already are, it will lead us to alienate a large portion of our usership. Right, changing tack here. Is your organization eligible for funding? The criteria for funding will differ for each of you depending on where you are, and also depending on the funder you're looking into and your organizational structure. Some funders will require you to be a charitable trust, while others don't. This isn't going to be grant writing 101 from a layman's perspective, but I just wanted to put some key tips in for you to consider. Number one seems pretty basic, but figure out if you actually are eligible for funding, and if you are, what kind. There's council funding, larger governmental body funding, philanthropic trusts, gaming funding, bequests, all sorts. And each of these will have different criteria for you to be able to submit an application. Find some like-minded funders operating in your area. Funders like for you to prove that you're already doing what they're looking for, rather than that you've pivoted to fit into their goals, much like the way I have shoehorned in a photo here, which doesn't really relate. Each funder will list their priorities on their website. So if you do a little digging, you can find whether or not you're aligning with their core values. Check the guidelines first. This can take some time and be extremely repetitive, but some funders will change their criteria for application or their values or who can apply on a month-to-month basis. For example, with gaming venues, there has to be a venue operating within your local area for you to be eligible for funding, and sometimes these gaming venues will close or change ownership. There's nothing worse than going through the process of drafting an application, collecting all the information you need for an application, reviewing that application, spending all this time only to get a letter back from the funder saying you don't meet the criteria. It is much better to do the prep in advance so that you don't waste your time or theirs. Think about connecting with a local funding advisor. Your local boards can be a really great place to start for collaborative funding, and most of the larger funding bodies will also host drop-in sessions or open days or online Q&A sessions for those who are interested. In some cases, particularly with smaller funders or more local funding bodies, reaching out via email before you apply can be a really good way for you to introduce your organization, what you're hoping to apply for, and they can then steer you in the right direction. So we use a program called Gem Local, which operates in both Australia and New Zealand. It's a subscription-based service where you build an organization profile and it matches you with grants that are available, sends email alerts when new funds open or information changes, and keeps a running list of lots of open applications. It's not 100% comprehensive, but it is an extremely valuable tool for us, and it costs us about $500 a year. We definitely get $500 worth of value out of it. There's also things like Fund Sorter popping up at the moment, which is another subscription-based model for organizing your funding applications, and it also has an AI integration that can help you write your funding applications. If you're really tight on time, that might be something worth looking into if you're based in New Zealand. I'm assuming there is some sort of Australian counterpart to Fund Sorter, but I just don't know what it's called, so you may have to Google if you're interested. It's also really important, if you're an organization that relies on funding like we are, that you keep an ear out for any news regarding funding in your specific sector. Head up those funding workshops, meet directly with the funders, subscribe to industry-specific funding newsletters. So, for example, for us, Creative New Zealand is a really big one as an arts organization. Just make sure that you're arming yourself with as many tools as you can to succeed. I found it notoriously difficult to get representatives from these funding bodies to come and see our venue, but having a face-to-face where they can see exactly what it is that you do and that you can speak directly to the impacts that that funding has on your organization can be what gets your application over the line. So if you have found a local funder who aligns really well with what you're trying to achieve, just keep at them. Okay, strategic planning. Strategic planning will mean something different to every organization depending on your needs. As a trust, we undertake strategic planning every 2 to 3 years to ensure that we're keeping on track with what we're providing as a trust. We generate a simple one-page document which lists what our strategic objectives as a trust are. We submit that with every single one of our funding applications, and we review it relatively frequently so that we can be sure that we're achieving our trust goals and have a charitable purpose that reflects what we're actually doing. I've also just put a blank template up there for anybody who's interested in starting strategic planning. On a less charity-based level, strategic planning can also be an overview of what you want to achieve in a given year, a long-term plan for where you want to see your organization grow to, or a public statement of intent for your spaces. There's no right way to create a strategic plan because each of your venues are unique. If you're part of a larger team, this can be a great day activity where you all get together, you dream and scheme and make suggestions about the direction your intentions will lie. We get all of our board together and spend 4 hours sitting and talking about the highs and lows of the last few years, where we can improve, sharing Kai, and doing some vision setting while we work through that strategic plan line by line. We've done that a couple of ways in the past. We've had a mediator come in and guide discussion, and we've also undertaken strategic planning independently with great results from both instances. One way to kick off a strategic planning will be to talk about my favorite thing again, priorities. Now, unlike my good friends, the Vancouver Canucks, Kete Aronui is not in a financial position to do any sort of major rebuild. So we have to acknowledge that our priorities for this year and 2027 and most likely 2028 will be things that are manageable within the physical limitations of our spaces. I feel like I can't overstate the importance of knowing what the priorities are for your venue and your organization. In a perfect world, your space would be suitable for every kind of hire, every kind of event, every class and activity, but that honestly just isn't the reality. Identifying where your priorities lie can be a great place to start any conversation about future or strategic planning. Do you want to have the most flexible spaces possible? Have a really big kitchen for cooking classes? Create spaces that are suitable for soft play? All of these are things that will guide your strategic planning and your budgeting for the years ahead. You'll already have a great understanding of what your users want from you. This is based on your most booked spaces, your most booked times of the day, or your recurring hirers, who are also a great way to get an understanding of what is a demand from your current user base. Another good kickstarting question for strategic planning is, what are your points of difference? Kete Aronui being open 24/7 is pretty unique in our area. And granted, we don't tend to see a lot of activity between 1 and 3 a.m. We still know that by remaining open at those hours, we can always be there for someone in a pinch. By assessing what makes your venue unique, you can then capitalize on that. Highlight those unique things in the promo of your spaces, or do some targeted marketing to local groups who might benefit. If you don't already have a good handle on what makes your space unique, and if you have the time and the option to do so, go visit some other local spaces. Talk to your other local providers, tour council venues, ask questions, and if you genuinely cannot take the time to get out of the office and visit anywhere else, just do a good old internet sleuth and have a look at what other venues in your area are doing. To be able to meaningfully make change for your venue, you need to have your priorities clearly defined, as they will shape any changes you need to make in order to ensure your venue is meeting not only the needs of the people that it serves, but also the interests of your stakeholders. The implementation of your priorities will, of course, look very different for each of you. And you might find that you're already ticking every box you want to with your spaces. So your priority might be ensuring that you're able to continue to meet those standards. Or you might find that you've got a really underutilized space. So your focus might be on expanding your community reach, or finding a strategic partnership with one group who might be able to make the best use of that space. Working with a small team. In ice hockey, there is a max of 6 people on the ice at any one time. There is one goalie and a mix of 5 forwards in defense. And then there are the rest of the players, the coaching staff, the management team, sitting on or standing behind the bench, waiting to jump up and do their thing. I view our organization a lot like that, except both me and Lara have to play all 6 positions at one time. While there might only be 2 of us actively working, we still have our roster of casuals, our board, and our key contractors who are ready to jump up and get stuck in it at any given time. A big question that you can ask yourself as someone who works in a small team is, what do you have the capacity to take on? In recent years, because of how busy our venue is now getting, we have employed cleaners to come through for 4 hours a week. I certainly do not have 4 hours to dedicate every week to cleaning. Is that something that you have time to do? Or is that something you could be outsourcing? Again, this is going to come back to priorities. I promise this is almost the last time I'll say that word. For us, it's about connecting with new users, making sure we're doing anything on social media, ensuring we have clean and safe spaces. I have a lot of wants, but not a lot of capacity to get them over the line. So if I want something like new content for our social media, I have to ask, can I manage this in-house, or is this something I should be outsourcing? That is also going to be answered in part by your budgeting. So maybe the question really is, do I have the capacity and resources to manage this in-house effectively, or do I have the financial option to outsource this project? Which will lead us to everybody's favorite subject, time management. I used to have unrealistically high expectations for myself, which truly only leads to disappointment. It has been a really steep learning curve for me coming to terms with the fact that I just genuinely cannot do it all. It's important to do what you can to prevent burnout within your team. And as someone who is 50% of my team, I am a big fan of preventing burnout. A lot of this is going to be pretty basic stuff, but it's also the kinds of things that can be easy to forget about when you're really bogged down in the weeds. Make sure every member of your team has clear responsibilities and duties. This absolutely will change over time, but having somewhere for everyone to start from means that nobody should be getting confused about tasks that they're supposed to complete and nothing gets lost in the cracks. There are truly so many software providers who can help with this, things like Monday.com and Zoho and Slack. However, I personally find the admin of inputting tasks into a third party to be an extra job that I honestly just don't want to do. What I find works for me is a Google Calendar. I have that set up with recurring reminders and tasks for completion. These are the things that I know that I need to be doing in a given day or week or month or fortnight to ensure that our facility is ticking over. They can be big, medium, or small picture. I genuinely have reminders in my calendar set for things like changing the batteries in our smart locks, emptying the vacuum cleaners, doing the rubbish. Truly just some of the most menial tasks, but it is the completion of these tasks that has a really positive impact on Kete Aronui. I'm also constantly looking for ways to make my own job easier. I would rather not have to answer the same question 50 billion times from users, so do your users have clear information about how to get into your spaces, what your expectations are for them, what the Wi-Fi password is? Listen to the rhythm of your venue. Have you had a sudden influx of questions from users about the same things repeatedly? We started experiencing issues when new users would access our venue for the very first time, as they were often there after office hours. So I'm getting multiple calls in the evening from people asking the same sorts of questions. Where can I park? How do I get in? So I made the decision to take the time to create an email template for our first-time users with answers to some of the most common queries people had in the past. And that has dramatically reduced the amount of after-hours calls I get. Small things like that, which take 5 to 10 minutes to initially set up and then maybe 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes to complete for each new user, does save me time in the long run and gives our users confidence to access and use our spaces for the first time, which I think anecdotally leads to repeat customers. So back to my question of what do I do if I need new content for our socials? And a great way I can answer that is through collaborations. I'm going to touch on collaborations briefly in 2 ways, with our team and also with our users. Collaboration within our team is something that I really love. Because we have a pretty small roster, I'm able to keep tabs on things that people love, things that people are good at, and talents that our staff might have. I'm lucky enough to say that not only is my ED a renowned actor and director, but she's also a photographer. We actually have 2 photographers on our roster, a graphic designer, 3 musicians, an award-winning choir director, healthcare workers. Almost all of them are actors of some sort, comedians, multidisciplinary artists, dancers, and of course, one person who can answer all the ice hockey-related questions. What this means for me is that I have a wealth of talent to draw on when opportunities arise. We've used our graphic designer in the past for poster creation. We've submitted funding applications for projects with our videographers. We've sent job or event opportunities to certain staff members when they crop up. And lots of our team members are also casual users of Kete Aronui. So when they come and tell me that our signage isn't clear or something doesn't work, it's a really great way for me to get some feedback from a trusted source and investigate those potential changes that I can make. Finally, I just want to touch on the idea of collaborating with your users. Your hirers are such a valuable resource in so many different ways. We've run things in the past where we will provide free room hire in exchange for us being able to use photographs of them in marketing and as online collateral, which is what all of these photos have been taken from. I've also drawn from our range of users to help me program for events or put certain users forward for opportunities. Sometimes those opportunities might benefit our venue in some way, like individual practitioners securing funding for a term's worth of classes in our studios, and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, keeping those connections alive is a really important part of your venue's overall health if you want to be seen as a cornerstone in your community. You might want to think about other ways you can collaborate with your users. Can you host an open day where each of the teachers who use your spaces can do a free session for your local community? Something like that, which might engage people who aren't already aware of your venue or who are looking for a new class or hobby to take up. One of the questions that we get asked a lot as a venue for hire who don't do any internal programming is what is actually on offer in our spaces. This is something that's on my mind at the moment, and I'm currently looking into ways for us to highlight who is using our spaces regularly. We have Bollywood classes, ballet classes, burlesque classes, apparently all the B classes you could want, but we don't have a central space where we can promote those. Which means if someone's interested in picking up a new class or a hobby, they have to go find that information themselves independently. Which means there's a great opportunity for us to collaborate with our hirers on a new project where we create a mural or a photo wall or some sort of central space where our casual users can see what else is available at Kete Aronui. So here's my extremely brief summary of what to take away. Priorities, people, money. These are the three things that need to be in harmony within your venue. We should all be looking at how we can achieve balance between what we're spending, how we're supporting, and what we're choosing to focus on. Taking the time to do a review of what you're offering versus who is using your spaces, see what they might need, find the gaps that aren't filled by your venue or other local providers, and just remember that it's okay to make changes if things don't work. Ask questions of your users and your colleagues, listen to their answers, and just remember to be kind to yourself. You probably can't do it all, but I guarantee you are doing so much more than you actually realize. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, and please let me know if you have any questions. Over to you, Carms.
Thank you so much, Connie. That was so informative, and not gonna lie, you're a great speaker. I don't know why we haven't had you in the past.
It was the ice hockey, wasn't it? I know it.
It was, but you're just such a natural, and I think it was really easy to follow, and it was really practical and really relatable for people with small teams such as again you and Lara, two-man operational team.
Yep. I should mention Miriam. She's number there's only one name that I left off that list. There was 3.
Yeah, no, but honestly, I really thoroughly enjoyed that. Some of the notes that I've written, I have a lot, but just some of the things that really stood out to me from your session before we move into Q&A. So for anybody, while I'm mentioning some of the stuff that stood out to me, you are more than welcome, those in our audience, in our chat, to ask any questions for Connie, anything regarding her presentation or anything regarding your own venue operations, or if you would like some advice on certain things, like just pop it onto the chat and then we will get onto it after this. But some of the things that stood out to me is it's important to define the priorities that are the most useful for you guys in terms of impact versus nice to haves. I really loved what you said, that when you said priorities should be reciprocal with regards to your users and for you guys as well. Within grant writing, arm yourself with as many tools you can where you can succeed. And I think that is so important because the amount of people I've talked to about grant writing, whether that is with regards to venues, is like it's such a tedious process. And again, like you said, there's nothing worse than when you've done all the work and then for you to get an email saying you weren't even eligible in the first place. So, our time is money. And so we need to make sure that, we're on the ball with that. It was really awesome when you said highlight what makes your venue unique and capitalize on that to really showcase what your venue does and who you're for. And so I think that was really cool. And it's important to do what you can to avoid burnout, especially since you operate within a small team. And so I think, like, obviously you've mentioned a lot, but for me, like, those were some of the key takeaways that I got from your session. While people are still popping into the chat, I did have some questions. I said one of the questions I had was, what are common roadblocks that those with small teams or budgets often do with venue management that you reckon they can avoid from the get-go?
Oh, I think one of the easiest pitfalls that people find themselves in is that you make a decision without doing any research first. I think it's really, really important. Like if you're looking at changing a software provider or implementing a new system, it's really important to do the research before you put anything into practice, because you probably will find that like there's an element of the software that won't work for you, or there's a person in your team who cannot access something. Like we run some industry specific software in our theater that is only available on Macs. So if we have anybody bringing in their own PC or anything like that, like outside hirers, it won't work. So it's really important to make sure that you do just a little bit of research before you before you like really lock into anything, particularly when there is a financial outlay.
Yeah, that's cool. And the other thing is, what can you suggest as the first steps to tackle for someone who does feel overwhelmed with all the tasks? Like you said, like it's not just about managing the venue, it's about sorting the budget, it's about sorting priorities, it's about having ideally the strategic planning with other people, but at the same time, you're still doing your everyday tasks. For someone who's probably watching this, that it's probably, let's say, it's just them, or again, it's just them and another person, and it's just all too much. What would you suggest are the first steps to tackle for them?
It's so easy to get overwhelmed. It really is. I think if you have the flexibility, particularly for people who are working by themselves, this will depend on the kind of worker that you are. But like our ED will start answering emails as soon as she gets up in the morning, and then she'll take a couple of hours off, and then she'll come back to work. And she has the flexibility to kind of like come and go throughout her day. So I think it, depending on who you are, like either having the freedom to work when you feel like you have the time where you can sit down and you're like, okay, I have 3 hours to sit down and think about the next 3 years for my venue. I've got 20 minutes, so maybe I don't have time to kind of hit that sort of stuff first. Like if you are like me and you're in a team of two or three or whatever that is, it's just really important to be an open communicator like that. It's really, I think we all need to get better at being transparent about the fact that like if you're feeling super overloaded, there's no point saying yes to another project that's then going to take another 3 weeks, and you're only going to feel even worse at the back end of that, and like you fully overstretched yourself. I say that as somebody who does it all the time. I always want to say yes to everything. I always want to be there to support everybody who's coming in and just do whatever I can to make it easier for them. And sometimes that is to my own detriment. So I think it's just really important to be honest with your colleagues, be honest with yourself, and just have a little bit of flexibility if you can. And I understand that some people will be working in council venues who maybe are like, you can only work between these hours, and that's quite stressful. As somebody who's never worked in like I call it an adult job. I've never really worked an adult job before. I don't really know what the processes are for working in council or in like a big organization like that. But yeah, just be transparent with people, be transparent with yourself. Don't be afraid to say that you're not capable at this current point in time. And that's not to say you won't be in 2 days or 2 weeks. Like just be realistic. Be realistic and be nice to yourself, please.
How did you, because you mentioned earlier in your session with regards to time management that you were the person who wanted to do everything all at once. When did it get to the point where you were like, man, I need to manage my time properly? But like, how did you go about it?
Work in progress. It's a work in progress for sure. So I had to figure out like what was going to work for me. So again, this Google Calendar thing has been like a real lifesaver for me, and I genuinely have reminders in there to do really boring stuff, but I try to break it up. So it's sort of like, I know if I've been sitting at my desk for 4 hours and the rubbish needs to get taken out, it's like, great, I can go stand up, I can go do something physical, I can move my body, which also helps my brain kind of like reset and not get so focused on my screen. But honestly, it truly is a work in progress, and it's just about trial and error. I think I started to get better at asking for help, which is so hard, particularly when you have a team of two. And like my wonderful boss doesn't like me to call her my boss. She's like, we are colleagues, which is such a lovely way to look at that we are there to help each other. Like we genuinely are. We're here for the same purpose. We're here for the same goal. Like let's work together rather than trying to work independently and maybe not achieving as much as we could. Yeah, so it's just trial and error, baby. Do what you can.
And I loved what you said in the beginning of your session before you got into the nitty gritty stuff, that it's like at the end of the day, you don't see, let's say, the walking distance rehearsal space near you guys as a competitor. Like you're all within the same journey. You're all here to provide a space for your communities. And so there's no point thinking, oh, like, how do we do things better than they do? It's about learning and actually collaborating, and then seeing how they operate and seeing what you can adopt that they do, and then you also sharing knowledge. And I think that's so important. It's nothing harder than feeling like you're doing things on your own
Yeah.
in your own niche space.
I don't think anybody who is watching this or listening to this is going to be working in a vacuum. Like, even if you are, I don't know, like, I feel like Perth is really far away. And, like, from me, like, if you feel like you're out there in the middle of nowhere, kind of doing this thing on your own, you
Mm,
still have colleagues in New Zealand, you have colleagues on the other side of Australia, like, you have people who are in the same boat as you. And it is quite helpful to remember that if more people feel like they can access spaces like ours, they will get out there and do it. Like,
mm,
I know that there's a whole thing about supply and demand, and that's really good for economy, rah, rah, rah. But I think it's even better when people know that there are spaces that they can go to, and then they have fallback spaces. I love
mm.
being a fallback space, man. We get bookings from people 10 minutes before they want to be here. And I'm not looking at that going, how do I get that person to book 8 weeks in advance? I'm looking at that going, cool, that's somebody that's going to come in and use our space. And we've been here for somebody in a pinch. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Some questions from the chat. We have one from Jordan who says, "We can't always eyeball our venue between clients. How do you deal with damage or messes and fees in that case?"
Great question. We are pretty loosey goosey. I will also say that we have taken out a lot of stuff that we've had in our venue before. So we used to have microwaves and all sorts of stuff. Periodically, those microwaves would walk out of here. People would leave messes in the microwave. We just started paring some of that back and saying, okay, we don't really need to have that. So you probably cannot see from the photos. In our rehearsal studios, we have chairs. That's it. There is a cleaning fee that we will attach to people's bookings if they are if the spaces are super filthy. There is usually one of our staff here 5 days a week. We don't really have staff on site on the weekends unless I'm here working in the theatre, because Kete Aronui is directly below our theatre. So we operate on a really high trust model. Pros and cons, man. Really high trust model means that we get caught out when people bring in literally like 10 pizzas and just leave the pizza boxes stacked up somewhere. We used to be a no waste facility where we didn't have rubbish bins down in Kete Aronui until one day I found the drawer where people had been leaving all of their rubbish. And then we got some bits. But we also use security cameras. They are there for the safety of our staff and our users, but they are also a really great tool for us to be able to pinpoint and say, hey, I'm not calling out of the blue. We've seen that you have left a huge mess in your studio. Please, you need to pay the fee. SpacetoCo have this really great thing where you can just tack on extra fees onto people's bookings, which is really helpful. So we just charge people. But I never charge people without talking to them first, because sometimes there is a genuine emergency or whatever. Again, we're a high trust model, but yeah. So pros and cons. But we don't have a heap of issues. We haven't had a heap of issues in the past. So it is very much that sort of I try not to let the 1% ruin it for everybody else.
Mm, mm. That's so good. Also, Jordan, you did ask, is it possible in SpacetoCo to send people a set message automatically when their booking is approved? I'm pretty sure you can, but if that is not a feature that is currently live yet, we know that it's in the works. Also, if not, please reach out to your customer success person, and they can walk you through some hacks around that. Another question. Sorry, I'm scrolling through. There's so many comments. Where Todd asked, where would one start with sector-specific funders, charitable, outdoor rec, or ed venues here needing facility upgrades plus PPE for clients, plus people training and salary needs? Funders seem not to fit all four at the same time. It's a great point, to be honest.
Great point, Todd. I don't know whether you're in New Zealand or Australia, but they're your wherever you are, your government will have a list. So in New Zealand, if you look at the DIA's website, there is a list of all of the funders most of them that you can apply through. We do a shotgun approach. So we don't ask any one funder to cover all of that. If there are 4 different projects, you're applying to 4 different funders. If you are in New Zealand, the DIA has a genuine facilities application, so you can apply for facility-specific upgrades. If you're in Auckland or above, Foundation North also have facilities funding for genuinely just specific facilities funding. If you're a recreation venue, a lot of the gaming trusts really like recreation and sports. So you should be looking at local gaming venues that are in your area, if there are any. Some people have mixed feelings about taking funding from gambling, but it is part of the harm reduction process. And you're allowed to feel weird about it, because I do too, but it doesn't stop me applying to those people. So, I mean, right now I'm working on 4 different funding applications for 3 separate things. The big thing to be aware of is that most funders won't want to see a funding application for something that you already have on the go. So if you apply to one funder for your facilities upgrades, you do have to mention that in a further funding application if you are trying to sort of do 2 applications at the same time. So sometimes it's about being strategic with your timing, where you go, okay, it's winter, we don't want to do any facility upgrades in winter, or we do, whatever it is. You have to kind of think 3 months in advance of like when you're going to be getting the answers for that. Todd, my email is going to come to you. Just send me an email. I will go into this in great detail.
I'll give you another webinar on this, just specifically for
a
you.
webinar on how to do funding as a person who didn't know how to do funding.
We'll get Connie back next year, I promise. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So it's awesome that a lot of people have also shared some of their ideas with regards to the questions that maybe Jordan may have. So it's really awesome to see people, again, collaborating, as we've said. But if there are no more questions on the chat, I think we'll just wrap it up. But remember, everybody, you are more than welcome to reach out to Connie. Wait, hold on. Wait, someone said another question. We still got time, so just one more question. Todd said, I am also under the assumption that the funding groups talk with each other about whom they have funded projects for us, and therefore another founder would not additionally fund it.
Not necessarily for the same project, but sometimes. So, for example, if you put in an application for $20,000 to get your facility a new turf, look, I'm using language that I don't understand. What is a turf? And they only give you $15,000. You can then go to a second funder and say, hey, funder A gave us $15,000. We just need $5,000 to complete this work. It is part of the same thing. They sometimes talk to each other. They sometimes don't. I don't know how much of a cabal there is in the funding scene behind the scenes, but most of the funding bodies will have a list of their board and their staff on their website. So you can also see if you know anybody and kind of hit them up and chat to them about what their priorities are and whether you might be able to flick an application to them. It's all about personal connection.
100%. But again, thank you so much, Connie. It was such a delight to have you here. I'm not gonna lie, I will reach out again at the end of the year to schedule.
I will bring you another big picture of Gritty. I can't wait.
Yeah, but this was actually so fun and so informative, and so we're so grateful for your knowledge, your experience and expertise, and just everything you bring. And so before I kick you out, everybody just send your love to Connie on the chat, and she can bring but without further ado, I'll get Emily to kick Connie out. But without further ado, before we finish this session officially, thank you so much for everybody who joined us today. As mentioned at the start of the session, we will make sure to share Connie's contact details, her slides, and all the resource that she had mentioned today, all the links to, she's actually lovingly gave us a spreadsheet of all the things that she's mentioned. And she also will also share the pricing guide and the blank template for strategic planning that Connie has shared. She's very generous with this session. But also we have a lot of resources at SpacetoCo that may help you in your work. Some can be revenue streams that you may not have considered for your community venue. So we'll pop that into the email as well. So look forward to that. Our next collab will be on the 25th of August. Please be sure to register for it. And the topic will be about customer support. So shifting customer support from reactive to proactive. It will be a panel discussion from the team at SpacetoCo, which will be awesome. The link to register for this will also be sent in the post-event emails, but also because you've now registered, you will get the invitation emails for all collabs in case you're interested in any of those topics moving forward. Finally, if you're interested in seeing, if you're not a host with us yet, but you're interested to see what SpacetoCo is all about and the cool features we have and how we can reduce time in your admin just so that you can do more with your work, feel free to click that QR code. But again, it will be in the post-event emails. So finally, thank you everybody for tuning in. We will see you at the next collab, hopefully, and have a great day. Thank you.